Hello to folks who've already joined us. We're going to get started in about 2 minutes. Hi, everyone. We're going to be getting started here. We've got people rolling in, and I'm really delighted to be welcoming everybody to our first coffee break of 2026. I can't believe it's May, and we're just now having our first one, but here we are. I'm Julie Williamson. I'm the CEO of Karrikins Group, and we're really thrilled to be talking with you today about our alignment maturity model and some of the ways to help your teams to move from level 1 to level 4, or from whatever level you happen to be at. I'm going to be looking at the chat, which is down here to my left a little bit, so you might see me glancing down there. If you're out there and logged in, you might want to just say hello in the chat. Make sure that you're chatting with everyone and not just with panelists, hosts and panelists. So if you can just click on everyone in the to button in your chat and say hello. We'd love to hear where people are coming in from. See a couple of friendly faces out there. Brent Bowman just said hello, and Carrie as well from up in Fort Collins. Julie's coming in from Phoenix. I love that. Brent's coming in from Denver. Bruce from New Jersey. We are all over the United States. That's awesome. Well, it is just a minute past the top of the hour, and we have a tight schedule here, so we're going to go ahead and get going. For folks who are watching us on video, I know some people just are on audio, but if you're on video, just a couple of notes. I'm going to be, like I said, kind of glancing down to check out the chat every now and then. I see someone from California. That's awesome. And also just checking in on our content over to the right a little bit. So if you see me glancing around, that's what's happening there. I want to make sure everybody's comfortable with that. And we are going to dive in. At Karrikins Group, we do a lot of work with teams around how they lead together. We really believe that you need to know what you're doing, you need to know why you're doing it, and you also need to know how to do it together as a team. And that's where we spend all of our time and energy, is working with leadership teams to try and figure that out. And the reason we do it is because we know that while what and why are important, they're insufficient to really help teams deliver together on ambitious goals. If you have a big enterprise goal in front of you, your leadership team needs to be working together to make it happen. And that led us to creating our alignment maturity model as a thought exercise for teams to try and think about where are they? How might they place themselves in this maturity model so they can figure out what they really need to work on as a team. And one of the things that we found is that level 3, which we're going to talk about in just a few minutes here, is actually one of the most dangerous places to be. But let's take a step back and let's look at the model as a whole. When we look at the model across 4 levels, level 1 is often what we see with holding companies or with really decentralized organizations, where essentially businesses do run as independent entities. They have their own goals, they have their own objectives, they have their own accountability, their own functional support, and they're running as their own businesses. That's okay, it's not uncommon. By the way, all of these levels are fine for different kinds of teams, but it's important to be intentional and to be thoughtful about what you're doing and why in those different spaces. So isolated islands, very much, people just off doing their own thing. Grudging cooperation at level 2 is where we often start to see some conflicts coming up. This might be an organization that is starting to move into a matrix structure, or they're starting to have shared resources, especially in functional areas. And that brings up conflict across the different parts of the organization as they have to figure that out. It means that leaders who might have been used to being very independent and autonomous are now having to be a part of something bigger, and they haven't done the work to really work through that. And so they wind up in conflict about it. Level 2 is usually pretty obvious. We see a lot of sometimes loud arguments or disagreements about who gets what resources, when, and why. Level 3 is what we call benign agreement. It's where everybody is very polite, they're very respectful, they really enjoy each other, they genuinely like each other, they feel like they are a team, but they aren't having the conversations that they need to get really into alignment about what it means to work together towards shared goals instead of just working vertically in their own part of the business. And then in level 4, active alignment, this is where we have really dynamic conversations. It's where we're, as leaders, very comfortable continuously negotiating all of the different shared resources that we have across our business and the goals that we're working towards. We have shared accountability. We're able to embrace that as a team and be working towards shared goals. This, by the way, works in all levels of organizations. A lower level team might have a shared goal to deliver at a certain level within the organization, while individual people on the team are off doing their own things. So you can apply the alignment maturity model in a lot of different levels in the organization. I'm just curious, as you look at these different levels, which of these levels have you experienced with a team? And you can pop it in the chat. I'm curious if there's anyone who has experienced any of these different levels who can just pop that in there and let us know where we are. If they feel familiar, if it's something that you're like, oh yeah, been there, done that, or if it's something that you aspire to. So just pop a number in the chat or a level, and let's see where people are. Somebody said all of them. Yeah, I think we've all been in all of them, haven't we? Like we've all been, if you've been in business for more than a minute, you've been on a team that operates as an isolated island. You've been in a space where it's just grudging cooperation. We're kind of like, yeah, but. And we've been in a team where everybody's in agreement, but we know we aren't getting where we need to go. And hopefully you've also had that experience of being on a team where there is real alignment towards shared goals. Maybe that goes all the way back to playing on a sports team in high school or college, but there was that sense of community, like we are in this together, we've locked arms, we're doing the hard work, and we're getting through it as a team. See one, definitely 3, and it is certainly situation dependent. Yeah, by the way, really high functioning level 4 teams can easily drop back to level 1 during times of financial stress. So when suddenly the goals aren't being made, those shared goals are being a struggle to get to, it can be hard to stay in that aligned space. And it's really easy to drop back and just want to be an isolated island. Like, I'm just going to take care of my part of the business, and that's my best contribution. So alignment takes constant nurturing. It takes constant energy to stay at that level 4. So I appreciate, Brett, you calling out that it can be situational. It is absolutely true. Yeah, I think this idea, and again, the model is really a thought exercise for you to take with your team and say, where do you think we are and where do we want to be? Like, it might be appropriate to be working in a more isolated way, but if we want to get to alignment and to shared goals, there is some work to do. Let's take a deeper dive into each of these areas. Just quickly, we'll talk about levels 1 and 2 because I really want to focus on level 3. 1 and 2 are usually easier to see. They're easier to diagnose. We can know when we're in these situations. But as I said, that isolated island space is usually something like a holding company or a really decentralized decision-making organization where people are off with their own budgets and their own goals, and all they have to do is make their number, and then they're good to go. When we're in that grudging cooperation, it's often where there's now starting to be a sense that there have to be some shared resources in particular, maybe because of a cost-cutting exercise, or maybe because you're going into a new geography that isn't yet resourced. There's all sorts of reasons for it. But now we're starting to see some conflict about who gets what resources, whether that's people, money, or time. We've all been in these situations, but they are easier to see, and they're honestly easier to diagnose as we go forward. Where we often see teams today is in this level 3. And level 3 is what we call benign agreement. It's where we're like, yeah, we agree, that's a good idea. I really hope somebody will go forward and do something about that. Level 3 is dangerous because it's hard sometimes to diagnose because things feel fine. Has anybody ever been on a team where you're like, things are fine, but you're not actually getting to the goals? You're not actually delivering on what you want to get to? That's a really common situation to be in. And when we think about being in level 3, it requires leaders to rethink what it means to be a part of the team and to reconsider how they're showing up in this space. I'll give you an example. We worked years ago with a company that was going through a pretty significant transformation. And they were trying to really encourage, from a sales perspective, that they were selling across the portfolio. This is very common from a go-to-market perspective. We've worked with many companies who are trying to do this. Here's what ultimately happened, and this is a very abbreviated version. I'm just going to boil it up a little bit, but at the most fundamental level, the sales organization was being incented to sell things quickly. Velocity in the pipeline was the goal. So they were just moving very fast on their contracts. The product team was being incented to make delivery turnaround times for enhancements to the product. So they were being measured, and their goals were around how fast are you getting these mods out into operations. Operations was being held accountable to goals around uptime for the cloud-based system that they were using. So you have sales trying to move fast on contracts. What do they do when they want to move fast? They do a lot of customization, right? So now product is trying to move fast and meet all of those customization requirements that they never agreed to or were consulted on and that aren't part of the product roadmap, but they're under a lot of pressure to get those out the door. And then operations is losing its collective mind because they're like, we can't keep uptime and reliability where it needs to be when we're constantly putting in these half-tested modifications that product is pushing us to meet the sales requirements. And so we have these three really important areas of the business with goals that are in conflict with each other at the most senior levels. And resolving that is getting pushed down in the organization. So at the senior leadership team, it feels like benign agreement. We all agree that the growth goals are good ones. And in isolation, each of our goals make sense. But when we look across and push those down into the organization, it's chaos. And the people down below are in this completely misaligned place where they're trying to make goals that fundamentally can't be met at the same time. Because at a senior level, you need to be able to prioritize which goals are most important to us right now so that we can meet the enterprise goals for the business. That's a very, very common situation that we see with teams that are in this level 3, this benign agreement space. And here's how that looks often is that they'll show up in meetings together and everybody will be like, yeah, we're doing okay. We're doing okay. We have, some hiccups here, some hiccups there, but it's all under control. We've got it all under control in our area. That's a really common sign of benign agreement. Like we've got this handled in our area. And then again, down below, there's a lot of chaos because things are fundamentally in conflict. What's often happening around the table is people are looking at each other and they're like, yeah, I kind of know that it's not okay over there in product, or it's not okay over there in sales or in operations, but I'm not going to say anything because we respect each other. We like each other. We're not going to put each other on the spot, right? So we're going to stay in this space of really comfortable agreement, but we're not going to do the work to push through and get aligned around it. That's the risk of being in level 3, is that you don't hash out those kinds of things at the right level in the organization. And you leave it up to people, the kind of boots on the ground, to resolve it without clear direction from senior leadership. That's what we call the failure gap. Being in the failure gap is the space between agreeing that something is a good idea and doing the work to get aligned and get it done. We have all been in the failure gap in our lives. If we hadn't been, then all the statistics about New Year's resolutions wouldn't exist, right? We all say things are a good idea. Like, yes, we really should do that, but we don't do the work to actually deliver on it. And that's part of what keeps teams in level 3, is they all agree that the goals are the right goals, or that the opportunity is the right opportunity to pursue, but they're not in their own areas doing the work to make sure that they're reprioritizing resources, that they are moving things around, that they are supporting each other rather than having goals that are in conflict with each other. So the failure gap is a really, really common experience, and it happens organizationally at an organizational level as well. I'm just curious, as you think about that, and then maybe in the chat people can pop in, have you ever been in the failure gap? Anyone ever experienced that? I have, by the way. I wrote about it in my book, Make How Matter, that I always have agreed that it would be a great idea to learn a new language, and I've never actually done the work to make that happen. So we've all experienced that. I'm going to take a look at the chat real quick and see if anybody else has been there with me. Got a couple coming in. Yeah, as you get a chance to think about it as we go forward, just let me know of what that looks like for you. But let's talk about a couple of signs. Yeah, Carrie's writing a book. Elise says, yeah, it happens all the time with health goals. Yeah, it's a very common one. The failure gap in that space of being in agreement and not alignment, again, very, very common human experience. But when it happens at a team level in an organization, it's especially difficult to break out of. There's a few signs that you can look for to see if maybe you're stuck in level 3. One is that meetings are on repeat. We just have the same meeting over and over again, and we go around, if you can imagine like a status meeting where everybody just always says, yep, I'm green, or maybe I'm a little yellow, but I'm under control. And you just go around the room and everybody is kind of punching their ticket, but they're not really having an in-depth conversation about what's happening in their part of the business. Another might be that decisions continue to get remade or priorities don't get held to. So we say something is a priority, but then we don't actually show up and do something different with our resources. And I would say another sign of being stuck in level 3 is everybody is just very polite. We're not going to actually put somebody on the spot, or we're not going to ask somebody a tough question because we want to be nice to people and not create any waves. So these are some really common signs. I'm curious if anybody can think of any other signs of being stuck in level 3 in that agreement space without moving into alignment that you've seen with your team. I'll just take a look at the chat and see if there are any that come up around signs that your team might be stuck in level 3. So we've got a couple here on the list. Any others that come to mind for you? And I'll just check in on the chat here and see what people might share. Yeah, Daniel says, we say we will come back to this conversation again and again. I love that. Like, let's take this offline. Let's come back to it next week. I think that's a great one, Daniel. Yeah, very common sign of misalignment. Eyes down around the room. Yeah, nobody's making eye contact with each other because they don't want to say what's right at the tip of their tongue. They know what they need to say, but they don't want to say it in that space, in that room. Yeah, those are some great additions to this list. I think it's really important to start to notice when you're stuck in level 3. So keep an eye out for some of these signs about what's happening with your team, because I will share with you the cost is really high. When it comes to transformation in particular, this is from a McKinsey report from 2024, so fairly recent, but they estimate that there's over $2 trillion wasted in transformations that come up short of their goals, where they don't quite get to the revenue goals that were promised or to the cost savings that were anticipated. That's a huge amount of investment that just goes right out the door because teams aren't aligned to the hard work that it takes to really transform their organizations. The good news is that while it costs real dollars to transform your organization, it costs social capital to get out of level 3. What we have to do in order to move from level 3 to level 4 is we have to change how we work together, how we orient towards each other, the conversations that we're having, the way we're making eye contact around the room. I love that one, Brent. When we think about getting to level 4, it's really all about aligned work leaders starting to work together to deliver on their most ambitious goals for the organization. And level 4 is where we're able to have those tough conversations without making it uncomfortable for people in a negative way. It should be uncomfortable sometimes to talk about needing to reprioritize your goals or that you might be coming up short because of some bigger problems in the organization. That's okay. That level of discomfort is okay. But what we want is for people to be able to have what we call quality conversations, holding the space for quality conversations about what's really happening in the organization and where trade-offs need to be made in order to get aligned and be delivering on shared goals rather than just in your own area or your own discipline. So let's take a look at, actually, let's move forward. Let's take a look at a couple of ways that you can do that. One of the things to recognize, and Brent brought this up earlier, is that business as usual sometimes can take over and trump level 4 alignment. So even if you get there, it can be hard to stay there because leaders do tend to default to old habits of being more comfortable, of kind of going back to levels 1, 2, or 3, unless they're really focused on maintaining that level of alignment, or a crisis takes over or a new priority pops up and everybody's attention gets redirected. So being able to stay really focused on staying in level 4 is important for a team to really embrace as a way of working. How they work together needs to be through the lens of how do we stay in alignment? How do we make sure that our goals are not in conflict? How do we have hard conversations about whose priorities get more resources right now for the business? And those can be really uncomfortable but important conversations. When we think about moving from 3 to 4, as I mentioned, we talk about being in quality conversations. Now, we're going to talk about this more in just a minute, but I'm sure that if I asked for a show of hands, everybody on this call would want to be in fewer meetings. I'm just going to look, raise your hand if that's true for you. I'm sure we're going to see a few hands go up, right? This idea that I want to be in fewer meetings is so common. I'm here to tell you, being in level 4, being in alignment does not mean fewer meetings, but it might mean better meetings. It means you're having different conversations where you're actually working the issues that need to be worked. You're having the tough conversations in a way that is respectful and is kind, but is also pushing the organization forward to being able to take on really ambitious goals that they might want to get to. It's also about really being honest about how to do it together. And at Karrikins Group, we look at that through the lens of our behavior model, and in particular, the key influencers of mindsets, group dynamics, and trade-offs that we're making. I'm going to flip up to our behavior model real quick, and let's take a look at it. If you want to get to different outcomes, so if your outcome is we want to be at level 4, we want to be an aligned team working towards ambitious shared goals, then leaders have to make different decisions and exhibit different behaviors. They can't just push the work and the resolution of the inherent conflicts down deeper in the organization. They have to do the work themselves. And that means they have to agree to different kinds of trade-offs and navigate blockers in a different way. We look at the key influencers of individual mindsets and group dynamics, as well as organizational factors, to try and help people think about how do I make different decisions and behaviors that will drive different outcomes. Now, of individual mindsets, group dynamics, and organizational factors, where do you suppose people like to spend their time, money, and energy? Just think about that for a minute. And spoiler alert, most of the teams that we work with are very comfortable spending time, money, and energy on organizational factors. They want to rewrite the process, redesign the organizational structure. They want to change the meeting agenda. They want to dive into those processes as organizational factors because they feel really tangible and they feel like something that you can control. But where the magic happens for getting to level 4 is in individual mindsets, group dynamics, and trade-offs. Having the conversation about what am I thinking coming into this? What are the group dynamics that we're normalized around? Avoiding key conversations might be a group dynamic. What are the trade-offs that we have to negotiate? So when you say something like, we need to grow by increasing sales velocity, well, you're going to have to trade off operational reliability. We have to have that hard conversation, right? What does that really look like for other parts of the business? So it's important to start making these decisions through that enterprise lens. And that's where people stay in that comfort of benign agreement. They don't want to have those hard conversations about what it really means to reshape their individual mindsets, group dynamics, and change the trade-offs that they're navigating through. So I want to just click through a couple of ways that you can take away from this coffee break to think about navigating the behavior model in different ways that will help you get to level 4 alignment with your team. One is really thinking about changing the questions to change the outcomes. We often talk about leaders needing to change the questions that they ask. I'll give you an example. In a status meeting, sometimes the question is, what's your status? And then that's it. If that's the only question that I'm going to get asked, my status is going to always be pretty okay, right? It's going to be unusual that I'm going to say to a whole room full of people that my status is in red or dangerous or something like that, right? I'm going to have that. I'm going to kind of like slide over that conversation. But if in a status meeting, the question becomes, what resources do you need from other parts of the business? Now I'm thinking really critically about enterprise level leadership and looking across the team, across the business to say, yeah, here's what I'm working on. Here's the blockers I'm coming up against. Here's the trade-offs I'm making. And I do need help from other parts of the business in order to meet the goals that I've agreed to in my contribution to our enterprise level goals. So changing the questions will change the outcomes. That's just a really simple example, but I'm sure that you can think for yourself in meetings that you're in right now today. There are probably opportunities to ask different questions in order to have more of a quality conversation about, are we really aligned to this shared goal that we're going after? Another one is to normalize transparency. Unfortunately, we often hide behind the numbers, right? So we're able to provide some data that supports our positions, but we don't create on teams this sense of radical transparency about what's happening in different parts of the business. And what that does is it prevents all of your leaders or all of your team members from understanding the big picture. And if at a leadership level you don't understand the big picture, it's very difficult to make aligned decisions because you don't know how your decision impacts other parts of the business. So normalizing transparency and sometimes doing that with tools and resources, those organizational factors I talked about, can be really helpful. So things like how we report out, where data comes from, the degree to which we're holding the space for quality conversations where people are honest about what's happening in their part of the business. Those are really important ways to move from level 3 to level 4. And then the third one I'm going to share with you is get to the small thing. Oftentimes, and I think that this is what puts us in the failure gap with our health goals, with learning a new language, think of any New Year's resolution you've ever tackled, as well as putting us in the failure gap, that space between agreement and alignment with big enterprise level goals, is we try to take a big leap. And taking a big leap often can land you right in the failure gap. But if you're taking small steps consistently over time, you absolutely will change the outcomes. We all know this. We learned this from the space program, right? Which is small, like just a 1 degree difference can have a radical impact on where you land on the moon or on Earth or any place else. It's the same with how we get to alignment. Taking small steps consistently over time will absolutely change the outcomes that you deliver if you do it together as a leadership team. So don't worry about getting fully aligned right away in some big catalytic event. Think about getting aligned by changing small things consistently over time. And that can be about normalizing transparency or changing the questions that you're asking. So think about what are those small steps that we could take that will help us to create alignment and then to stay in alignment by continuing to do that work, even if we get hit by a crisis or something pulls us back to business as usual. So 3 tips for you around that. The thing about level 4 alignment, though, like I said, is it doesn't mean fewer meetings, but it does mean better meetings. So if you are in a meeting where you walk out and you feel like, yeah, we got things resolved, I believe that we're going to stick with those decisions, and we all know how to change our priorities, to shift what we're working on, to redirect our resources in order to deliver together, then you've been in a quality conversation that is supporting your aligned leadership. If you walk out of a meeting and you're like, oh, been there, done that before, I didn't need to sit through that again, had the same conversation we had last week, that means you're not in alignment. You're in level 3 benign agreement, and you need to really roll up your sleeves with your team and challenge some of the habits and the rituals and the group dynamics that you're experiencing so that you can move up into level 4 and really work together to achieve your most ambitious goals. With that, I just want to leave you with a couple of ideas. We're just at the end of our 30 minutes. It's gone by so fast, but there are a few things just to consider. This is really about being willing to have the conversations that people might rather avoid. One thing that we like to ask of our clients is, what are the conversations that you're avoiding? And we almost always get a big laundry list. People know what those conversations are. They just don't know how to get into them. So a first step can be taking an inventory. What are the conversations that we're avoiding? And how can we start to hold the space for quality conversations that will let us get there? If you can take that one small step to ask people to make that inventory, then you will be on your road to starting to change the outcomes that you deliver. If you want to think about taking this forward, a couple of things for you. You're always welcome to say hello at karrikinsgroup.com. Shoot us a note. Let us know what's going on. We'd be happy to have a conversation with you. A summary of this will be coming to your email box in the next few days, maybe next week. We'll get that out the door. And then finally, I just want to let you know that we do have our brand new Make How Matter Accelerator out in the market today. We have special pricing through the end of June. This is a public course that we do that helps people just lean in and learn the tools of alignment. Most of our solutions work is focused on enterprise level teams, and that takes 6 months to a year to complete. But this is a short course that you can do in your own time. It typically takes people 4 to 6 weeks. You can do it a little bit at a time, or you can do it all at once. It's self-directed. And you can just get a feel for the tools and resources that we use to help teams to come into alignment. So there's a QR code on the screen. We'll have that in the email that we send out as well. And with that, I just want to wish everybody a very happy Thursday. Thank you so much for joining us in our first 2026 coffee break. As we like to say at Karrikins Group, To go fast, go alone. To go far, go together. To go far fast, get aligned. Thank you so much for joining us in this journey, and we'll hope to see you soon.